Healthy living, success to life. Now, speaking about success and living life, Sheila Singam is a trainer and coach who has a passion for helping others unleash their potential to achieve success. Her company, Human Equations in Bahad, is in the business of imparting emotional and spiritual intelligence skills to corporations looking to maximize the potential of their workforce. Now, last month, she was here to help us project what we want to attract. And this month, she returns to help us learn the art of giving and receiving feedback. Welcome to the show yet again, Sheila. Thank you so much. By the way, I say yet again, but this is my first ever. Extremely excited to have you on the show, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, Sheila, feedback itself, giving and receiving feedback. What is feedback?
Well, feedback is basically hearing or, giving someone some sort of information about themselves or about their performance or their behavior or their attitude. So if I were to come and say something to you about your work performance, for example, that is in a sense giving feedback, right? So when people give that to you, you can either choose to take it as criticism, which many of us do, or you can reframe it. We've talked about reframing. It's putting a positive slant on something. We can reframe it as feedback, which gives it a rather more sort of neutral effect.
Ah, all right.
Now, that is in a certain world where somebody wants to, make that extra attempt to give feedback in a pleasant manner. But at times, in reality, there are certain maybe expats who come and work here in Malaysia or in Asia. They're very direct with their feedback. And at times, I mean, in my opinion, and I'm just just seeing what we have seen here, they don't take it that well. Is it an Asian trait not to get feedback or taking feedback in the right manner?
Yeah, it's not part of our culture generally. And I found that as well, Roshan, when I'm interacting with people from the Western cultures, they're very direct and they see nothing wrong with it. It's like, I'm just giving it to you in a neutral way. And you notice their feedback is usually more neutral.
Yeah.
It's not so personal because they deal with the matter at hand. They give you the feedback and that's it. After that, they move on and we can all be big, great buddies and go and have happy hours together and all that, right? But in Malaysia, people don't have a culture of receiving feedback. It starts from the time when we were children. We were never given positive. Now, there are two kinds of feedback I must stress here. When we talk about feedback, many people take it as a negative connotation. But there are two types of feedback, right? One is positive feedback, where people giving you telling you something good about your performance or your behavior, and that's very encouraging. That's in a sense like appreciation. And appreciation goes a long way. In a lot of organizations, people stay because they appreciate it. They might not be given much more money, but they'll stay for a long time because they are appreciated. So that's positive feedback. Then you got negative feedback, right? Negative feedback is when people, we call it negative, but if you, again, you can reframe it. Instead of thinking of it as negative feedback, you can think about it as constructive feedback. So let's start with positive feedback. When we were young, we hardly ever got positive feedback. I mean, some of you did, like my generation of people, hardly, because people will come to the house and they'll say, oh, your daughter's so pretty, and then the parents will say, don't say in front of her because her head she'll get swollen headed and all that. Or, if you've done well in your exams, wow, your daughter performed very well, so clever. And they say, please don't tell her because then she won't study after that. Even in school, teachers and all thought that if they praised us, we would become big-headed. I don't know where that came from, that belief came from. But it's just such a limiting belief that, it really nips people's potential from growth. Yeah, their growth, yeah. So you've got that, the positive feedback. So we're not used to receiving it. So if someone comes to you, Shankri, and says, oh, that's such a lovely dress, you go like, what, this old thing? Oh, I got $50 at the sale, So you actually then negate the positive feedback. Then after that, people don't want to give you feedback, because we don't value feedback. Positive feedback should be treated as a gift. So when people give it to you, just say thank you.
Wow.
Thank you for the compliment. I really appreciate that. We don't know how to do that. You'd be surprised the number of people who get blush and they get flustered and like
all these awkward body gestures when you say something
like,
to them.
Please don't praise me, So
That's me. I'm feeling bad now.
Yes, Roshan has this. He really does.
Oh my
Whenever
God, okay.
people say nice things
thank you.
Yes.
Just learn to say thank you.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Okay.
Now, Sheila, we'll be speaking more to you in regards of how to give and receive feedback gracefully right after this commercial break. Don't go anywhere.
Thank you for staying with us. We have Sheila Singam from Human Equations here with us in the studio, and she's telling us and teaching us how we should give and receive feedback.
That's right. Yep, Sheila. Now, right before we went to commercial break, you were telling us, first of all, that feedback starts from home and when you're younger, and you were talking about positive feedbacks. Now, you know, like, I have to share this, Roshan, that sometimes when you go for family gatherings, people don't say the nicest things to you, especially when it's the first thing. After hi and hello, it's something really bad after this. So these are negative feedbacks. Can we talk a bit more about negative feedbacks?
Oh, I can totally gel with what you're saying, Shankri. I don't know whether it's a cultural thing, but people do tend to make personal remarks.
Yes.
You know, as in, oh, you know, your hair's too short, or you put on weight, huh? Or why are you so thin? Or that dress doesn't suit you. And that kind of feedback is unnecessary.
Exactly.
For me, I have a policy. And this is something I learned from my husband and business partner. He said, when you want to say something to someone, remember 3 things. Is it beneficial for you to say it? Is it beneficial to the other person whom you're telling it to? And is it beneficial for the third party whom you're talking about? So in anything that we're saying to someone, there always has to be a purpose. If I'm giving you positive feedback, there is a purpose. That is, I want to compliment you, make you feel good. If I'm giving you constructive feedback, the ultimate purpose should be to improve the behavior or change the attitude that person is carrying, you see. And this is especially so in the corporate world. You always need to have, so we in our trainings, we teach people and organizations, and you'll be so amazed. We do this in a lot of our trainings because fundamental to communication is the ability to give feedback properly. If you can give feedback in a neutral way, and the other party learns how to receive it in a gracious way, it goes so much further in improving the communication and teamwork in organizations, similarly in families as well. But if you just go to someone and say, you know, you're lazy, you're not performing up to standards, and the guy is like, what standards are you talking about? So we actually have a model for giving feedback, all right? So it starts with describing the behavior that needs to be improved, all right? Telling the other person the effect of the negative behavior. So first is behavior, that's B, and then you have the effect of the negative behavior. What is that negative behavior doing? Because sometimes when you tell people, hey, you shouldn't behave in a particular way and you describe the behavior, they say, why? What's wrong with that? You know, so you need to tell them what is the impact. Impact to them, impact to the family, impact to the organization, whatever entity they belong to. Then you got to tell them what's the expectation. So a lot of times people describe the behavior and they don't tell people what is expected instead. So the third thing you need to do is tell them what's the expectation. This is how I expect you to behave instead. All right? And if you behave in this way, then this is the positive results we're going to be getting. So it starts with behavior. The negative effect of that behavior needs to be spelled out. Then we talk about the expectation. And then the result, if the expected behavior is implemented. Very
Sheila,
clear.
You mentioned 3 very important points, and in order for us to get it right, we must first know what is wrong with our approach. So what are some of the biggest mistakes we make before we give feedback from your experience?
Well, first of all, people do it in a very personal way. That when you're giving feedback to someone, it shouldn't be, I feel this and you made me feel this way and things like that. It could be stated in a more neutral way. When you shout at me during meetings, or when you just, you know, clamp down my ideas during meetings in front of the client, let's say, or when you argue with me in front of the client at meetings, the effect is that it causes the client to look at us as a very fragmented unit. They will lose confidence in us, they will lose trust in us because they're saying that, hey, you two can't get your act together, why should we believe you? All right? So instead of doing that, I suggest before we go into the meeting, we have a debrief session whereby I throw my ideas at you, you throw my ideas at me, we agree to disagree, or we agree what we're going to agree upon, and then when we go to the client, we present a united front. Now that will actually have the impact of impressing them that we are forge a well-forged team that they can really trust and rely upon to execute whatever project that they're giving us.
I strongly believe that that does not only work in the corporate scene, also in family or couples. I think that is so important to do. Now, all this while, Sheila, we've been speaking about giving feedback and how to do it well. Well, being on the receiving end, the thing about feedback is you say you want it, but you actually don't want to hear it. That's the truth about feedback. And the reason this happens is because your ego gets in the way. So what would you suggest should we do when you're receiving feedback to ensure that our ego does not get into the way and even turn things sour after that?
Okay. Now, the first thing we have to remember about feedback is that when we're receiving feedback, I can't change the way you give me the feedback.
True.
Right? I can't sit down and say, hey, hang on, you gave me feedback, give it to me in an elegant, structured way that is neutral so that I can receive it. You know how people are. They'll just come and slam you with stuff. All right? The choice is yours, whether you want to look at it as feedback that's going to help you grow or look at it as criticism to devastate you. The choice is yours. We always choose our reactions. Now, years ago, I read in a book, when I was much younger, before I came onto the path of, people development and coaching and training and all that, all part of my own personal development, I read somewhere that said, at every clod of criticism thrown at you, look for the grain of truth.
Yes, which is very true.
Yeah, people might not. They might sort of encase that grain of truth in a lot of stuff, negativity, tonality that's wrong, facial expression that's angry and all that. But look for the grain of truth and how can I take this as a learning to help me improve? I'm not going to worry about the person's intentions, whether it was a power thing or to get back at me or whatever. I'm going to sift through it and see if there is a grain of truth. If there is a grain of truth, I take it and I act upon it to grow and improve. If there is no grain of truth and it's just malicious, criticism they're throwing at me, then never mind lah. Then it doesn't reflect on me, you see. It reflects more on you. And that's where we need to then take and project back that negativity onto the person and say, well, thank you for your feedback. I appreciate it. Never ever argue or defend yourself.
You just escalate the situation.
Unnecessary
It's
drama.
not necessary because at that mode, especially, you've got to look at the way the person's giving the feedback. If they're giving it to you in a very neutral, sort of caring way, take the feedback and appreciate it. At that point in time, you might not feel it's true. Go back and think about it, and you will find that grain of truth. But if somebody is coming and shouting at you all kinds of slander and things like that, at that point in time, there's no point even defending yourself because they're not going to listen to you. They're going to say, there, you're defending yourself. You're being kind of defensive. You know? So no need. Just sort of let it sit. Maybe a couple of days later, you can go back to the person and say, I really appreciate the trouble you took to give me that feedback. It's not easy to tell people things in this culture. I rather hope that in future, if you're going to give me the feedback, give it to me in a very neutral way. There is no need to shout and scream and yell and use abusive words because, that's not something I want to take.
Yeah, which is very true, Sheila. Now, many of us, we do give, like when it comes to negative feedbacks, we give it out, but we don't wait till a few days, the person who's receiving, to go back and speak to the person. Instead, we speak about the person to other people, which is only going to worsen the situation.
That's very true. I mean, in a sense, it's coming from a very, very, very meaningful place. Because, we live in a world that's not perfect. You mentioned, things we should be doing in terms of coping with regards to feedback, be it with family or be it with business. Would you say the first thing is a mental mindset from my point of view to help filter? But once I'm done that, how do I go about judging what to do and what to say from then on? Because it's all about coping and developing coping mechanisms.
I did mention this in a previous segment. What it is a good thing to do when you are receiving feedback to get into a dissociated position.
Yes.
Now, we are now in our position, we call that the first position, the me position. I suggest you just visualize yourself taking a few steps out of your shoes and getting into a neutral position as if you're someone else looking at that scenario where someone's giving you feedback from a neutral vantage point so that you're able to actually see where this person is coming from, what has kind of precipitated this feedback session, and then to also be able to more easily take the grain of truth from that. So I always advocate that if someone comes to you and starts yelling at you about something, there is feedback. That is feedback in a way, but dissociate so that you're not like in your shoes in the line of fire. You're above the line of fire, so you can really see where this person is coming from.
And you don't react for no reason.
You don't react for no reason. I've learned to do that now. I either, you know, go into a dissociated position and look at the person, maybe hum a song in my head. I am still listening to you, but I'm still keeping calm because I don't want to reduce myself to your level and shout and scream back at you like, oh, who gives you the right to come and tell me this and all that. Actually, we actually have no right to go and talk to someone else about you know, their personality and the attitudes and so on.
Right.
Okay, but if we're in a scenario where talking to someone, giving them feedback about their behavior, it's going to help the entity to which we belong, like family, community, workplace and all that, then, you know, if you have got authority over that person or even a colleague, you can go and give that feedback, but you must have the rapport with that person.
True, Sheila. Now you said that you know, feedback comes from everyone, family, community, and also from work. But I'm sure that the coping mechanisms, is there any difference when it comes to handling feedback from these different entities, whether it comes from family, or is there a different mechanism? Or is it just the same principle that we apply?
I believe it's the same principle. Actually, Shankri, it's rather easier to take feedback from your colleagues in the workplace than it is from your family.
True.
You know, it's rather easier because we all get very sensitive about family. But then at the end of the day, families are the ones who see the worst part of us. All right? So the same mechanism, the same way of taking feedback applies to both cases. You dissociate. You dissociate first, you know, step out of your shoes. Secondly is to reframe it as feedback. Third is to examine that whole cloud of feedback given to you and say, what is the grain of truth? How can I improve from this? Let's say your wife or husband comes to you and says, you're always shouting at me, you don't know how to talk to me. All right, okay. So this is a cry for help. They have a positive intention, is that they're feeling maybe very demeaned at the way you talk. So then go back and look at your tonality, the own words that you're using. Instead of shouting back and, you know, and saying, what do you mean I don't know how to talk to you? This is the way I'm talking. You're being too sensitive. You always examine yourself because you can't change anyone else. You can only change yourself. You can only change your own reactions. You can only take the positive actions upon yourself to change and improve the scenarios.
True.
So would you say that is the key to receiving feedback and filtering everything?
Yes.
But it's easier said than done. Does it build on my emotional settings in terms of whether I can filter things out or when I cannot? Does emotions play a very big part with this?
Definitely, definitely. See, we're all weighed down by the baggage of our past. So if you come from a culture, a family, you know, where you constantly were criticized, you were put down, then lots of emotions have built up over the years. All right, anger and humiliation and all that sort of thing. So it builds up. It builds up, and you know, it's like a set of dominoes all packed one, or maybe like a pearls on a string.
Yes.
So they all form this string that's actually, you know, what we call like a gestalt of anger. So what we need to do is like go and dismantle the emotions, go and get rid of the emotions. We do that through a process which we call timeline therapy. Get rid of the emotions so that all of that is dismantled, so that any time after that, whatever emotions that you might be feeling will not be building onto this foundation, right? It will just be an emotion for the moment.
Right.
Yeah?
Now, Sheila, you know what? Because today you've spoken so much about reframing and also dissociating. It's almost like you're recapping all the series that you've been on Vbuzz and you've helped us through. Now, you guys should have watched Sheila and followed Sheila closely. Now, for our viewers, could you just recap how to receive and give feedback gracefully?
Okay, again, I'll start with giving feedback. We need to learn to give feedback in a very neutral stance. All right, so if you're angry about something, do not go to the person concerned and give feedback at that point in time, because your emotions are going to color what you say in terms of your tonality, physiology, and even your words. So I suggest you calm down, keep calm. Very easy to pick up the phone or just go up to someone and just start blasting them. take a step backward, go away, go sit have a cup of coffee somewhere, think about it, calm down, choose a future time when you've calmed down to give the emotion, the feedback, so that it's not colored by emotion, right? Second thing, remember, we focus on behavior. When we give feedback, we don't focus on personality. We don't say to someone, you are like this and you are like that. I would point to the behavior that upset me, because behavior, that person can change. When you touch the very essence of someone's personality, they get very upset because it's all, it's sort of tied in with their beliefs and their values.
So you're taking jabs at them.
Yes, yes. People can't take that, So focus on the behavior. What is the negative effect that behavior has had or is having? All right. What is the expected behavior? And then what would be the result if they change and took on the positive behavior? All right. So that's one thing you do. And also remember that when you are giving feedback to someone, how is it going to help that person? You got to give it in the words, in a format that's going to help that person, so that that person sees that you actually intend for them to improve. But if you are just intent on hurting the person, then step away and hold on until you can have clarity about what is the real issue here. Okay, so that's about giving feedback. Is that helpful?
That's brilliantly helpful.
Extremely helpful.
And, really, there's a saying that goes that if you don't have anything nice to say to someone, or in this case, if you don't have anything that's going to make a person better, don't say it.
Yeah. I keep telling this to my relatives. Sometimes I walk in and they'll say, that color doesn't suit you. You put on weight. I'm like, and how is that affecting Malaysian economy or world peace?
Exactly.
If it is impacting,
you heard it right here on Vbuzz by Sheila Singam. Thank you so much, Sheila. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me back.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, all you young parents out there, stick around, because we've got a doctor who's going to change your life. That is coming up next, so stay tuned.